So, you have created the album you are ready to share with the world. This lecture will cover the next steps, the business side of professionally releasing your album to the global market. So, in this lecture, I'm going to be talking about PRO affiliation, branding, fundraising, organization. Yes, more organization. Some tips and tricks that I learned along the way, going through the distributor to get your UPCs and your ISRCs, which are the DNA of your tracks as they are being streamed around the world, collecting royalties for you. Registering those works with your PRO to make sure you're getting all of the royalties collected and monitored. Ordering physical copies of CDs from a wholesaler, or setting up a shop online so you don't have to front those merch costs. How about submitting to Spotify curated playlists before your music is even released? What about submitting to other reviewers, labels, and playlist curators? All of that will be covered in this lecture. So let's dig in. So let's jump right in with PROs. PROs, or performing rights organizations, are who monitor, collect, and distribute performance royalties to the respective songwriters and publishers of their registered music. Most PROs, like ASCAP and BMI, are actually nonprofit organizations. And the way their business model works is businesses and individuals who want to have copyrighted music performed, either played live in their venue or just streamed over speakers in their business, have to pay a license to ASCAP and to BMI in order to play that copyrighted material. The fees that ASCAP and BMI collect through licensing are then what is used to distribute the performance royalties to the respective composers and publishers of the music registered with them. I'll also note that not only are PROs beneficial for their monitoring, collection, and distribution of performance royalties, but they also do a lot for us as artists, like lobbying for beneficial legislation. For example, ASCAP and BMI actually came together in support of the Music Modernization Act that passed in 2018. If you want to learn more about the licensing side of things for businesses and venues, or learn more about what qualifies as performance royalties and the monitoring, collection, and distribution of those, go ahead and click on the link here in the slide, and it takes you to an informative article that gives you a bit of background on those concepts. Now that you know what PROs are and what they do, I'm going to dive into one of them because it is the one I'm affiliated with. You can only affiliate yourself with one PRO, so you have to make the choice. For most American composers, it is the choice between ASCAP and BMI. You just have to weigh the options of the benefits and perks of each one. I chose ASCAP because of their collaboration and ease of communication as far as accounting and registrations with the distributor that I use, which is CD Baby Pro. I'll get more into that when I talk about distributors, but that's just a little explanation for why I went with ASCAP. ASCAP is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. For any PRO, for the distribution of performance royalties, it is split 50-50 between the author and the publisher. The author is you, the composer, the songwriter, and then the publisher, if you don't have one, you just won't get that other 50%. So, might as well create one. You can create an independent publishing company to serve as the registered publisher for your works right through ASCAP. And it can remain there just basically as a vanity label for the purposes of collecting your performance royalties through ASCAP, or you can turn it into a full-fledged independent publishing company. It's really up to you how far you want to take the publishing in this scenario. For me, I am a registered composer as Elena Brown, as well as a publisher with my independent publishing company, Red Pin Publishing. So, now for something a little different, and we will get back to the more technical and administrative stuff in a moment. But for anyone who is embarking on this journey of professionally releasing an album internationally, branding plays a big part of the success of your release. This includes album art and any promotional art and design that you curate, and can extend to the branding on your website, your social media accounts. You want to have consistency across all of those in terms of the aesthetics, the voice, colors, fonts. So let me show you a few examples. Here is my album cover. And here are some of the promotional designs that I created to support the album release and attract people to my brand as an artist. And now here is a look at my actual professional website. You can tell that the branding is pretty consistent. I have quite an aesthetic choice when it comes to the sans serif fonts and a lot of dark colors mixed with some pinks and purples. What can I say? That's my aesthetic. This also extends to my professional accounts on social media. In this day and age, branding on social media, marketing yourself as an artist on social media can be one of the most powerful tools to get your album or your project to the ears of your fans. All right, so back to something a little bit more administrative. Let's talk about funding. So, not everyone may have access to the type of university resources that we do as college students and faculty. So, how can you plan to fund the entire production and release of an album without it being prohibitively expensive out of your own pocket? I found myself immensely lucky in my album production in that at the time I was a student at Florida State University and I was able to learn and develop a lot of my skills in the commercial music studio at FSU. And then I actually finished the album production at Indian Head Factory, which is a professional recording studio in Tallahassee, where I am very lucky to be a staff engineer now. But while I was able to absorb most of the production costs by being my own artist, producer, and engineer myself, and having my own place of work in a studio, I still needed an injection of funds to allow me to professionally register the works with a PRO, start my publishing company, register with a distributor, hire them as my publishing administrator, and front the cost of buying physical CD copies in bulk from a wholesaler so that I had CDs available at my release show. All of that certainly adds up. So, what I did was start a Kickstarter fundraising campaign, which was aided by a very crystal clear budget for exactly the kind of injection of funds I needed to cover precisely what costs. I incentivized people to donate by having gift packages for different levels of donation. One of these was a signed CD. Another was a sneak peek at the unreleased music itself. I also provided a lot of background to the album production process as part of my story. I wanted to compel people to donate by seeing just how much I have progressed as a musician and as an engineer throughout the process of creating this project. I let people see through the door of the emotional content of the album. I even described how it was all recorded on the acoustic guitar that I stole from my dad when I was 8 years old. I think it was the combination of my honesty and integrity to the campaign that inspired people to help me get this project off the ground. And my Kickstarter campaign was 100% fully funded before the album was even released. There are plenty of other ways that you can go about securing funding for your album production. If you are a student and it is part of some sort of research project, look into grants through the university or private injections of funds through donors who are interested in your type of art. If you are not affiliated with a university, there are still other methods of fundraising, of course. You can look into other crowdfunding sources. And one of my biggest pieces of advice is to turn towards your community. I feel very lucky that I was living in Tallahassee, where the arts community is so strong and the networking is incredible. Artists and venues and labels and other nonprofit organizations all supporting one another. So consider putting on a show or doing some gigs where you have every intention of everything that you make that night going towards the album production. Make your audience aware of that, and that will inspire them to invest in you because of the art that they are hearing right before their eyes, that they will want to support your studio album production so that more people can hear your art as well. Again, one of the biggest reasons that my album production was successful was because of organization. And once you are going about procuring funds, organization gets even more important because your budgeting, your timeline, and all the other aspects and moving parts of producing an album need to be clear not only in your head, but also in your Google Drive. I highly recommend having a Google Drive folder or some sort of online storage space where you can organize all the different aspects of your album production in one place. Here is a quick look at what my Exhale folder looks like in my Google Drive. All right, now that I've harped on organization enough, and you are working on some branding and marketing curation, and you have secured funds for the rest of the costs of album production, let's dive into distribution. If you want your music to be released on the international streaming services like Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Prime Music, Google Play, Pandora, etc., you need to go through a distributor. Distributors are the middleman for releasing your music digitally and physically sometimes around the world. There are plenty of distros to choose from, all of which have different pros and cons that you can look through to find the one that best suits your needs for your album and your budget. To see a comprehensive list comparing them directly in those different categories, click on the link in the slide. My distro of choice is CD Baby. I also went with the Pro upgrade to CD Baby Pro Publishing, which elects them to be my publishing administrator. Because I already have a publishing affiliation, this just grants CD Baby the ability to administer my publishing affiliation. But if you don't already have an affiliation with a PRO, by upgrading to CD Baby Pro, they will actually register you with a PRO for your album release, which is convenient. By having a publishing administrator, it grants you access to the mechanical royalties earned for your music. Again, your performance royalties are monitored and collected by ASCAP, but mechanical royalties are for things like just personal online streaming, as well as any international sales. So, without a publishing administrator, you won't get those mechanical royalties distributed to you. So, I recommend going this route or a similar route through another distro and including an upgrade to having your distro be your publishing administrator as well, so that you're not missing out on those extra royalties that your music is earning. Once you have picked your distributor and you are ready to upload for your release, you're going to upload the music, of course, again to the specifications that I went over in the first part of the lecture, which was sample rate of 44.1 and a bit depth of 16 as a WAV file. You're also going to submit your art, the album cover. They're going to give you dimension specifications, resolution specifications for that as well. You'll input all of the credits for the album and all the pertinent technical info. Next, you will set your release date, and we are going to talk about some things that you'll need to do before your music is actually released. So I highly recommend setting a release date that is at least 3 to preferably 5 weeks in the future. Next, you'll set your distribution permissions and monetizations. To learn more about all the digital distribution partners you can choose through CD Baby specifically, go ahead and click on the link in the slide. And in that link, you'll also learn what the different types of monetizations are for things like sync licensing for YouTube videos or any other sort of music to picture licenses and monetizations. You'll want to go through all of those and make sure that you aren't saying yes to anything you don't feel comfortable with, and saying yes to things that perhaps you hadn't thought of that could, in fact, make you money on your music. Next, if you're going through CD Baby, they will set up your official artist ID on both iTunes/Apple Music and Spotify. This is for if you're releasing music for the first time, so you do not yet have your official artist profile. This is a really great perk for CD Baby in that the way that they set up your unique profile on those two major streaming services, it protects you from your music getting mixed up with any other artist who has the same name or the same band name or similar album name. CD Baby ensures that Apple Music and Spotify have created a new and unique artist ID for you. Once you have all of that set up, uploaded, and approved, you will then get your codes. These are the codes that I have mentioned a few times now throughout this lecture series that are like the DNA of your tracks, so that anytime they are streamed anywhere traceable, your distributor and your PRO knows about it. First is your UPC. So whether you are releasing a single or an album, you are given a UPC for your release, which is a unique barcode assigned to that release that you will use on any design for any sort of physical copies of that material. Next are your ISRC codes. Again, these are like the DNA of your tracks. They're assigned to each and every one of the tracks on your album release by the distributor. This is again why it's very important that you keep track of the exact audio file that you submit to your distro as the mastered version of each track, so that the one that's given that DNA code is the one that you are always using anytime you send it anywhere, because it needs to be traceable. Anytime your track is streamed on a radio, YouTube, Facebook, or any of the subscription streaming services, it's being tracked using the ISRC code assigned to it. Not only is this used for tracking streams, but it's also used for calculating those performance and mechanical royalties. Once you have your ISRC codes assigned to each track on your release, you'll go back into your PRO account. You'll register each track using your ISRC with your PRO as the composer and optionally as the publisher as well. And again, the performances or plays of these registered tracks by the businesses and venues that pay their licensing fees are tracked by ASCAP, as well as by CD Baby Pro as the publishing administrator for those mechanical royalties earning international streams, and then you are paid the performance royalties. This is where all these different administrative elements really come together. You need a distro in order to receive the ISRC code assignment for each one of your tracks. You need a PRO to register each one of those works using an ISRC to trace any performances of that track to earn your performance royalties. They all work together. Again, you do not need to choose the same PRO and the same distro that I did, but I find confidence knowing that between ASCAP and CD Baby Pro Publishing, I am successfully earning all of the performance and mechanical royalties on my music that I have released and registered through both of those services. So let's circle back to why those UPC codes were important as well. For your physical copies, you'll want to have your UPC code on any of the album art designs. And this is so that no matter what format the physical copy comes in, it is always going to be traced back to your album, again, registered with that distro. So physical copies can come in many forms: CDs, of course, vinyl, making a comeback, cassettes, weirdly enough, making a comeback, and then USBs, single play USBs even, are a part of the market now. You can sell your physical copies in a couple of ways. You can purchase a bulk order through a wholesaler and then mark up the price for resale yourself. Or you can create an online store that only produces the copy per order, and then you just get a percentage. Often that percentage is lower than you would make had you ordered in bulk and resold it yourself, but the upfront cost of buying an entire bulk order can be cost prohibitive if that's not a part of your budget. I decided that a bulk order of CDs was important to me for my release show and thereafter. So I included that in my budget as part of my Kickstarter campaign. When I was fully funded, I was able to go ahead and make the purchase. I looked around at different wholesalers at their rates and their different degrees of customization of the CDs and the CD cases, and I decided to go with a company called Kunaki. They make CDs with a jewel case, and you are able to design the front cover, back cover, inside pages, as well as the design printed on the CD itself. Again, I had to include the UPC barcode on the cover design to make sure that it was traced back to my release. Here is the front cover, and here is the back cover with the track listing and UPC barcode. And here's the inside cover where I give credit to all my collaborators and have the copyright information at the bottom. Here is the actual design that is printed on the CD itself. So imagine a little circular cutout in the center, right where the smoke is appearing out of the lines, and the whole shape is a cut in a circle with that purple to black ombre effect. Like I mentioned briefly earlier when I was talking about my Kickstarter campaign, one of the reward levels for donating was a signed CD. So the first thing that I did when I got my order shipped in was make out those autographed copies for my donors. Alongside your CDs or other type of physical copies of the album, you can sell merch to both promote and hopefully profit off of your album release. Different types of merch can include stickers, which are a great option because of how inexpensive they are to bulk order and then hand out at shows or send in thank you notes to anyone who has helped make this project possible for you. And they serve a promotional purpose as well for wherever they are stuck. You can, of course, get some apparel with your album cover art on it. The same dichotomy exists as to when I was talking about physical CD purchases. You can choose to bulk order some shirts and other types of apparel or home goods with your album art on it up front and then sell it back at a markup that you choose. Or you can set up an online shop that has anything and everything with customization for your fans to pick and choose what type of apparel, what size, what color they might want, and then purchase it from that shop, which will then give you a percentage. So again, the percentage given to you by a shop like Threadless, which is what I use, might be pretty small, but to front all of those costs for the different types of apparel in all the different sizes and colors your fans might want can be pretty cost prohibitive when it comes to this type of merch. Again, things like CDs and posters, anything that you can sign or leave a little autographed note for fans at live shows, is not only a great way to make money, but also to promote your album. Next, we are going to talk about the process to submit to the Spotify curated playlists. A very important thing to remember about this process is that Spotify will only accept submissions to their curated playlists for unreleased tracks. This is again why when I was talking about setting your release date with your distributor, I suggested you set it several weeks into the future. This is to leave time for this specific action. So, once you've submitted everything to your distributor and they approve it all, which is a process that can take a couple of weeks itself, then they send it over to Spotify. Then you can see your unreleased album in your Spotify artist profile. From there, you can select one and only one of the tracks on this release to submit to a Spotify curated playlist. In the submission process, you're going to be asked a few questions about the style of your track. What genre categories might it fall under? What's the instrumentation? What's the mood? Things like that will help the Spotify staff member who reviews your submission, listens to your track, determine if your track is suitable for one of the Spotify curated playlists. Now, this might just seem like an extra step, another thing to do to factor into your album release timeline. so you may or may not decide to do it. But I really want to encourage you to try, because Spotify curated playlists can have hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners. Think about all those people who would likely not be hearing your music otherwise, who have decided to follow a Spotify curated playlist tailored to their mood or specific genre preference. Then they hear your song. It reels them in to your personal artist library catalog. Now you have a new fan. And now multiply that by 500,000. Now, before I get your hopes up too much, I will be more realistic in saying that it is quite rare that you get placed onto such a high caliber playlist in one of your early releases. I still think it's a very important process to include in your release timeline, and I think it's great practice for how to pitch your song to a curator. Now, there's one more concept to cover about submitting to Spotify curated playlists. Like I said, they have to be unreleased tracks received from your distro. Well, when I was talking about distros, I described how CD Baby will create your Spotify artist ID upon your first release. This means that you don't have a Spotify artist ID yet until you've released something. So you can't really go through this process of submitting to Spotify curated playlists if you don't have an artist ID yet. So, if you're planning on releasing an album, you don't want your whole album to be disqualified from this process just because you don't have your artist ID set up yet. One way to circumvent this is to do some pre-release singles. That way, with a single being your first release, CD Baby has set up your Spotify artist ID, and now you have access to your artist profile. Now, for your next release, either another single or the full-on album, you can go through this process of submitting to Spotify curated playlists with your unreleased tracks. I'll also note that in addition to being a way to circumvent this sort of unfortunate situation with not having an artist ID for your first release, pre-album singles are a great way to promote the album release coming up and to get some traction, get some fans who will be anxiously awaiting the full album drop. The way I employed this strategy was by releasing my first single, Let It Out, in February, which unlocked my Spotify artist ID and allowed me to release 2 more singles that I was able to submit to Spotify curated playlists, and then pick a track off of the full album release to also submit to those playlists. The Spotify staff members aren't the only playlisters in the game. There are also independent playlist curators, as well as reviewers and labels and A&R reps that you can actually pay to listen to your music to be considered for a review or placement on a playlist. Sites like Fluence and SubmitHub are designed to connect you, the independent artist, to these people. So you can log onto this site and comb through whole lists of reviewers, labels, and playlist curators to find people who review your kind of music or who curate playlists of your kind of genre. You pick someone who you think you might have the best chance with. You then pay using credits if you're using SubmitHub, or you pay using the rate that curator is established on Fluence for them to listen to your music and choose whether or not to review it or place it on their playlist. This does cost a bit of money, and the acceptance rates are pretty slim. So do not be discouraged if you've invested some time and money into sending your music to these people and no one has selected it. it's still really great practice for how to pitch your music to these kind of reviewers and curators who someday someone might listen and just set your career on fire.